So it is the same way we have to talk about these poems as well. They will have certain kind of backgrounds of all the poems that has been, selected for your syllabus. So here we don't have anything, like we don't have the direct poems. So even if you will get questions in the exam paper, you won't be asked directly that, okay, you have to write a critical essay or a critical analysis of a particular poem. What you have to write is that people, or the question will be like, talk about Jayant Mahapatra and his about Jayant Mahapatra and his vision about hunger based on the poems that you have in your syllabus, or with reference to any one of the poems. Okay, so such kind of question will be there. They will not ask you directly from any particular poem. Okay, so here what we are going to talk about today is block 4, and there are 2 or 3 important texts like the beginning of English literary study in India, then Dalit literature and aesthetics, and the anxiety of Indianness. These 3 important texts are there. So we are going to start because Harvest has been already completed few classes back by Manjula Padmanabhan. That is a play. We already have talked about that one, about the selling of organ because of poverty, right? Or now let's talk about Meenakshi Mukherjee's The Anxiety of Indianness. Then we will talk about the Dalit literature and aesthetics of Dalit literature that is written by Sharan Kumar Limbel. Okay, so the first one is The Anxiety of Indianness by Meenakshi Mukherjee. Okay, you can find it in page number 186.
Sir, in our books it is 191.
It's 191.
Yes, sir, in our book, the new book.
Oh, okay, okay. So yes, please go to that particular page, or you can also refer to that page. Like Meenakshi Mukherjee's The Anxiety of Indianness. Okay, it's talking about the language. It's talking about the language we use. Like there is a conflict between Indian literature, Indian languages. So here we are going to talk about the aspect of Indian writing in English and its space in India. Here it has also talked about the Indianness. It's also talked about the third world cosmopolitan. Uh, the very Indianness that we also found in the poems of Nissim Ezekiel, like where he was talking about, in one of the poem he was talking about that, okay, how when we are writing or we are talking, we use very often the a continuous form of making verbs like ing forms. Okay, so here we are going to talk about the very Indianness that we can find in another, sorry, Meenakshi Mukherjee's work. Okay, so English was seen as an alien language because it had been introduced in India by the Britishers. Okay, because it was a foreign language. When Britishers came into our country, during that time, Persian was the official language. Right now, we have official language Hindi and English, but during that time, the official language was Persian. So English language was very foreign to us during that time. Okay, when India eventually gained political independence from British colonial rule after 1947, there were a group of people who felt that India needed needed to gain cultural independence as well. Because even though we got physical independence, even though the boundaries and the territories were free from the captivity of the Britishers, it was culturally uh, not free. It was not actually emancipated from the cultural captivity, from the social captivity. Still now we are following the Britishers in many aspects. Okay, still we are hybrid people. We are not Indian, so we are not Indian in a sense. None of us. Maybe some of the people, those who are living in the villages, maybe those who have not got the touch of the modern world, what we are called rightly as modern, they could have much more touch of the Indianness. But most of the people, probably 99% people of India, is a hybrid identity. Okay, so they are maybe Indian by blood, but as Lord Macaulay once said that okay, we will make people or clerk from India, and they will be Indian by blood by but taste in it, but they will be English in taste. Okay, so this is end, and they advocate that uh, the newly independent India should discard everything that was British, including prominently the English language. So there was a movement as well also in 1942 before the independence. That was the Quit India movement, where people were fighting to quit everything regarding the British language, British culture, British lifestyle and everything. So that's what here she is also Meenakshi Mukherjee is also trying to point out. They felt that so long as English remained an important language in India, we could not claim to be completely independent. And it's very true. But anyway, this language has become a global one, and it is actually connecting the entire world. So it's very good in one sense, but the thing is that again, we have become the other within ourselves. Okay, so that's because of this English language and its culture related to this particular language. Okay, they believe that the continued presence of foreign language signaled that we had not yet succeeded in decolonizing our culture and our mind. So the decolonization of the mind is very much important. There is a very famous writer, or in a sense you can say called a famous critic from Nigeria, whose name is Gogi wa Thiong'o. He has beautifully written a short critical essay that is decolonizing the mind. So they were talking about the decolonization of the black people from the colonial aspects of the Britishers, but here we can also relate that one from our perspective as well. So what he is saying is that we are supposed to decolonize ourselves from every aspect of the Britishers, but it's not possible. Suppose you have been captured by some of the highwaymen, or maybe some of the robbers has attacked your room or your flat or your house, and they kept you under their gunpoint for almost like uh, 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, and you have started living in that way only. So there are certain movies where you will find that okay, the entire family has been taken as a host under the hostages, under the robbers. So when you are under the gunpoint and you have started living like that one, so it will be very difficult for you when they will leave you. Okay, suddenly when they will release you, it will be very difficult for you to adjust again or return back to the same state where you were. So similarly, we were being colonized for 250 years almost, right? So even it is not a very short period. So it is very difficult that the habits that we had grown during this entire period cannot be removed in a single wash, right? Right now, even if you are getting educated, even you are becoming, culturally and socially capable to think and fight and write back, but it's not possible to erase. Even if you are fighting back, you are writing in English, right? So it's not possible. Writing back again, it's not possible, and also completely removing all the identities that you have developed since your childhood and since your uh, family ancestries. It's not possible to completely remove them from your life. Okay, so there were some who felt that the good literature can be produced in produced in Bhasha. They felt that the Indian reality could not be captured in foreign languages like English. Bhasha was regarded as somehow pure and as inherent to the Indian context. Those writing in English, it was believed, were betraying certain cultural values, unlike those who wrote Bhasha literature. Even though you are talking about the second language or the third language or the fourth language, because it can be fourth, fifth, sixth language for an Indian, because in India we have multiple languages, multiple cultures. So uh, by birth we are accustomed to learning more than one languages. If you are Telugu person, you will definitely learn English simultaneously. If I am North Indian, so a person from North India will learn English, their own native language as well as Hindi or English simultaneously. So it's also true that okay, when you are learning a second language or a third language, it will be very difficult for you to convey the same feelings or same emotions through the second language that you can convey through your first language easily, right? So that's what she is saying over here, that there was also a suspicion that Indian writers who produced literature in English were packaging India for the consumption of a Western audience. So instead of producing good literary works, creative works, they are actually started a business of packaging the Indian culture and selling it for the Western audience. It was feared that the expectations of the Western audiences and the lure of the international market distorted their representation of India. Issues of authenticity and integrity thus cropped up repeatedly in the debate between Indian writing in English and Bhasha literature. Okay. Meenakshi Mukherjee thus notes that Indian writers of English tended to smudge out local specificities in their stories. Bhasha writings, on the other hand, tends to work out the dynamics of social changes in their narratives. There thus appears to be a greater pull towards homogenization in English works written by Indians. These takes tend to effect a create certain fluttering out of the complicated and conflicting counters, the ambiguous and shifting relations between individuals and group in plural community. In trying to account for the tendency of homogenize, Meenakshi Mukherjee comes up with two possible reasons. Firstly, the Indian writers in English has a scattered and diffuse target audience. So what she is saying that to make or to categorize all the writings of Indian people or Indian creative minds into English language, uh, to homogenize them into one particular framework, she has found that two ways that okay, the Indian writers in English has a scattered and diffuse target audience. Their readers do not necessarily share a range of socio-cultural experience because we already know that okay, our country is a multicultural and multilingual country. Therefore, it is not very easy to have one particular target audience who will share the same culture or same language. Therefore, they tend to narrate pan-Indian stories, right? Therefore, as we are nowadays, we are very familiar with the movies. Okay, if a movie is being released in Hindi and that is the first language, the movie will also be released in Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, and other regional languages. Similarly, if a movie is being produced in Telugu, it will also be released in other at least four languages. Okay, so that's what she is also suggesting that okay, when the writer is writing it, he or she is actually expecting a pan-Indian reader or audience. Secondly, Indian writing in English as a literary phenomenon became visible in the 1930s and was coupled with the last phase of the nationalist move. Indian writing in English, particularly the novel in English, participated in the process of imagining a nation. And the idea of a nation So in this particular treatise or essay, she has talked about the aspect of Indianness and the aspect of unity in terms of literature, in terms of culture, and in terms of language. Okay. The next important text is about the aesthetics of Dalit literature, and it is actually written by Sharan Kumar Limbel. So let's talk about this one. It's about what should be the aesthetics, what should be the thing that we have to talk about in in Dalit literature, or you can say that the critique of Dalit literature. It talks about the why should Dalit literature be conceptualized. Nowadays, Dalit literature, people are saying that the term is not good to say Dalit literature, but homogeneously we can call it as some people are saying it's a literature of the rebel. Some people are saying it's a literature of revolt. But people are saying that the term itself has a problem. Dalit. We should not call someone or categorize somebody or one particular sector of the society as Dalit. The term has some deeper connotation, which is, according to some people, are bad. Okay. So there is a need to conceptualize Dalit literature because Dalit literature rebels against set traditions. That's what I was saying, that they are sometimes being called as rebel, literature of the rebel, or uh, people who rebels against the misconception about them in the society. So that's why there is a need to conceptualize, according to Saran Kumar Limbel, the Dalit literature because it rebels against set traditions and attempts to actually redefine literature, especially the literature he is going to talk about, that is Dalit literature. Although Dalit literature has a history of several decades, even though it has a history of several decades, there have been hardly any attempts to theorize this literature which refuses to fit into the mainstream literary theories. This is a very big problem. The problem is that, in all the universities or in all the colleges, you have a department of English literature. Even though English literature, when we are talking about English literature, it will be mostly covered with British literature, okay? Not even the Indian literature. So when we're talking about British literature, leaving aside the Indian literature, and even if we are talking about Indian literature, we are taking the mainstream writers, right? Like we are talking about Raja Rao, we are talking about R.K. Narayan, we're talking about Anita Desai, like some of the good authors like Vijay Kumar, Vijay Tendulkar, then we have Girish Karnad. Such of the writers are being talked about or selected in the syllabus or in the course, but a very few texts will be selected from this sector or the writing of this sector, that is called Dalit, okay, Dalit literature. And that's why they are lacking. They're lacking the proper treatment. They are also lacking the uh, critical analysis of their text. They are also lacking good research in their own particular text and their stories and their life. Okay, because if you are saying that okay, literature is the reflection of life, then they are also trying to reflect their own life, the problems that they are facing, the problems that they are undergoing. Okay, but people, if you are not realizing to read them, if you're not realizing to analyze them, then it is not a justification, okay, of all the literature. That's why he's saying that okay, we have to theorize the literature which refuses it to fit into the mainstream literary theories. Of the many differences between Dalit and non-Dalit literature, the most important difference is that Dalit literature depends on reality. That's what I was saying, that it depends on reality. It depends on portraying the a real, image of the people. Whereas non-Dalit literature depends on imagination. See the gap between Dalit literature and the mainstream literature, be it English literature, be it, American literature or the literature of Indian of the Allied Society. So what Sharan Kumar Limbel is saying is that there is a huge gap between the literature. Even though we are pure, even though we are, talking about reality, even though we are connected to the life, connected to earth, connected to nature, we are not being, you know, under discussion. We are not being under analysis. We are not being under promotion. Whereas the literature of the imaginary world are being promoted, read widely, and also entertained by the majority of the people, people of the world. That's what he is actually saying. The question of the authenticity is crucial in a discussion of the literature because of the very nature of the literature. Okay. That it is the story of the victimized of his or her own voice and words. So that's why the question of authenticity is very crucial. The question of reality is also very crucial. The question of the truthfulness is also very crucial in the literature, because here you can talk about the caste system. Here in India, we have caste system. We also have class system. So both class and caste are existing side by side in our country. Whereas in other countries, you will find only one, that is the class system. But especially in America, there is a conflict between North and South, and it is based on the color, that is racism. So each of the countries have their own problems, but in our country we have two problems, that is class system and caste system. Class system is, the representation of the capitalization or capitalism, and caste system is again a representation of one particular religious belief, right? Based on that, we have a lot of discrimination in our society. And based on that, we can say that okay, when we were being colonized by the Britishers, entire country was being colonized, right? Second time, women's are being colonized by the patriarchal society according to the feminist perspectives. And if you are a Dalit woman, you are thrice colonized, right? Because you are a Dalit. So such kind of problems are existing in a society, and if a particular author or a poet is talking about these problems, people should get little interest and read about them. When we are wasting foods in restaurants and in other parties, in some sector of our society doesn't actually get their daily bread. They are starving. That's what Jayant Mahapatra has also said. That okay, that father of the girl who was fishing near the shore, he didn't find any fish, and finally he decided that okay, he will sell his daughter for 1 day or 1 hour or 2 hour to get some money to have food to survive. Okay, so it's we, the society, we the people, those who are having the affluence, they are forcing some of the people to do some activities which they do not want to do. So if there is a connotation, or if there is a definition of uh, heaven and hell, then obviously we are also part of that one. Okay, so the question of authenticity is crucial in a discussion of Dalit literature because of the very nature of Dalit literature, that is the story of the victimized in his or her own voice and words. So the definition of the term is debatable, but it is very important. Even though we can't, you know, define it, and not even a single definition can define Dalit literature, because each and everybody has their own stories, and those stories are very true, not like the imaginary stories written by the other mainstream writers. So silence over a text and talk of the right kind of a critique of the text will contribute to the disappearance of the text from readers' memory and critical discussions. Thus, it slowly dies out without achieving its purpose. So these are some of the aspects that has been delineated or portrayed or wanted to point out or share with the readers by Saran Kumar Nimble in Dalit literature and Dalit aesthetics in this particular short essay. Okay, if you have time, you can go through the actual essay. Otherwise, there is no necessity of that. But yes, because the text is also talking about the same thing, that you should not avoid their writing, so you should read that. Not in the sense that okay, you are showing sympathy, but because they are also writing, and their writing is talking about reality. That's what he said, that okay, there is a simple and important gap or difference between Dalit literature, and that is it depends on reality, whereas non-Dalit literature depends on imagination. Okay, that's what he was saying. The next essay is about the beginning of English literary study in British India. In the beginning, or in the first block, we talked about two important treatises, or one was Vanilla Kunti Subro's report on education, another one Thomas Bevington Macaulay Minute. In both of them, Subro talked about that how education should be in the schools, and on the other hand, Thomas Bevington Macaulay, he talked about the entire education system of Indian subcontinent based on the English language. So it started with that one, and it is actually ending with the same topic, that is the beginning of the English literary study in British India, written by Gauri Viswanathan. Here it talks about or contextualize the debates concerning English education in the 19th century and how English literature provided the British with a clue to resolve the conflict between the contending claims between the promotion of Oriental learning and the missionary activities. It also understands the imperial design between the beginning of English literary study. So before that time, the mode of the mode of study, or the mode medium of instruction in our country was Persian and Sanskrit. Persian, Sanskrit, all the classical languages were being used to teach and learn something related to our culture, science, and other aspects, geography, history, all these things were being taught and learned in that particular language, that is Sanskrit and Persian, and sometimes also in Arabic. But see, all these languages have become very, old right now, because in one sense you can say Sanskrit is not been in use in practice. It is there, we are reading, but we are not practicing. And until and unless you are speaking a language, it cannot be promoted. If it is only restricted to the pages of a particular book or a pamphlet or newspapers, it is very difficult to keep that language alive for a long time. So this is how gradually all these languages, Persian, even Persian, we have a country where people are talking about this language, but in Sanskrit, hardly few people are talking. Like only the saints or maybe the sadhus are talking about or reading in Sanskrit, and they have some knowledge about that language. But most of the people are pursuing the language, pursuing their career in a foreign language, that is English. And we are feeling very comfortable in this particular language only, right? So let's talk about this one, Gauri Vishwanathan's essay on the beginning of English study in English in British India. It actually tries to understand the question of British administration faced in the 19th century concerning the education of the natives and the attempts at religious conversion. So in the very beginning as well, when we were talking about the Macaulay Minute, we said that okay, it talks about two important aspects, and that was the medium of instruction should be English. We should not bother about any other language. He simply cut it down. Okay, he simply cut it down that okay, Persian will be replaced or all other languages will be replaced, and English will be the main language that will be the medium of instruction. In this language, we will teach and we will learn. We will teach some of the people from the society, Indian society, not all of them. And he talked about a theory called downward filtration theory. If he will teach one from the upper class, he will downflow his knowledge to the other people. So this is how we have to teach. We cannot create some good clerks from all the societies or people from all the societies. So he talked about that one. Then he said that okay, we will create clerks from Indian subcontinent, and they will be English in taste but Indian in blood. So that was the uh, statement given by Lord Macaulay. Okay, Thomas Babington Macaulay. However, in this particular essay, it locates the early efforts of people like Macaulay who sought to address this problem. It exposes the colonial motives behind the introduction of English education, which was able to impart moral and religious education at the same time. Okay, so Gauri Vishwanathan's essay was written when debates concerning the nation, what constitute English literature and the English literature syllabus were being addressed all over the world. This was also the period when the idea of the great tradition of English literature was being questioned and debates about the complex relationship between English and the local languages in East where British colonies was being addressed. Just a minute. Okay, so the debate was about that concerning the nation, what constitute English literature and English literature syllabus were being addressed all over the world, right? So Gauri Vishwanathan, in this particular essay, is talking about those questions or those debates regarding English language and the methods or the mediums those were being used in the beginning or in the beginning, that means after the independence in India, okay, or also before the independence as well. Before independence and after independence, we have higher education system that was uh, prevalent before independence and also after independence. We had so many, uh, you can say, education policies. So Gary Vishwanathan draws our attention to the Act of 1813, the Charter Act of 1813, which talks about Britain's responsibility towards the education of natives and the relaxation of control over Christian missionaries' activity in India. So, in the Charter Act of 1813, uh, just yes, we also talked about the Charter Act, and here Gauri Vishwanathan also drawing attention on this Charter Act, which talks about Britain's responsibility towards the education of the native and the relaxation of control over the Christian missionary activity in India. Okay.
ऐसे Oliver Gatlin जरा जाके नीचे आ रही है.
So the provisions of the Charter Act of 1813, this act asserted the crown's sovereignty over British possession in India. The company's rule was extended to another 20 years. The trade monopoly was ended, except for trade in tea, opium, and with China. It endorsed with the local governments and taxed people subject to jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And it was also talking about the uh, preaching of Christianity by the missionaries, and it was also talking about the budget of 1 lakh to provide to the schools or the education system so that they can implement it for the betterment of the education. So here Gauri Vishwanathan is also talking about that 1830 Charter Act. Okay, and in that she is talking about Britain's responsibility in two aspects towards the education of the native and the relaxation of control over the Christian missionary activity in India. However, the policy of British administrator not to support large scale conversion in India brings up the contradiction. So large scale conversion is also not possible to handle for them. So that was a question also there. The contradiction becomes more pronounced with the problem of the promotion of Oriental language, which obviously brings in the study of Hindu and Muslim religious texts as well. So there was also a conflict, as I mentioned when I was talking about in the beginning, that there was a conflict between the Oriental people, the Anglicist and the Orientalist. Okay, this kind of conflict was there in the beginning, and some people were supporting the Orientalist and some people were not supporting the Orientalist. Like some people were saying that okay, we should provide education in the British language, that is English, and some people were supporting that okay, we should provide education to their through their vernacular languages, native languages like Sanskrit, Persian, and Arabic. Okay. Yes. So English enters the picture by Macaulay's clever interpretation of Section 43 of Charter Act 1813, which allocated 1 lakh of rupees for the promotion of literature and science in India. So that's what I said, that in the Charter Act of 1813, it was mentioned that okay, they will provide 1 lakh as in the budget of education so that they can promote literature and science. And this literature and science is not actually the science and literature of India. It was the science and literature brought from the European countries like Britain. So Macaulay interprets the imprecision in this section regarding the languages meant to be promoted to the British advantage by making way for the entry of English. Okay. By the 1820s, the missionaries in India felt that English teaching was, which was secular, needed to change so that it could exert beneficial influence on the moral education of the society. Okay, so the missionaries were also felt that okay, English teaching, which was secular, needed to change so that it could exert beneficial influence on the moral education of the society. The curriculum followed a layer structured with classical languages being studied by the upper classes and religious studies being imparted to the lower classes. The policy of non interference in the religious affairs of the natives prevented the introduction of the system existing in England in India. So as they were talking about the relaxation of control over the Christian missionary activity in India, so they divided their duty that okay, the people those who are from the upper classes, they will read their own native languages, they will read about the classical languages, but the lower class people will be taught from the perspective of religious point of view, from the perspective of the missionary point of view, and there will not be any kind of interference by the British government. Okay, the violent reaction that might follow religious instruction and the possibility of controlling the lower classes by the submission to a spiritual authority were the two things that needed to be balanced. English provided the answer to this problem of conflicting interest. And because of these conflicts, there was also debate regarding which what should be done in the political and uh, yeah, in the political field, or you can say that okay, the people or the government of that time was being talking about this particular issue. about the process of teaching and use religious instruction for the lower caste people, because the higher caste are less in number, but the lower caste are more in number. Even though they are more in number, they are being deprived of their rights by some of the people. Maybe the elite persons are only 30% in India, but the lower caste or the middle classes are 70% in India, right? So the English curriculum was worked out in such a way that a selection was made of literary text like those of Shakespeare, Bacon, Locke, Adam Smith, that simultaneously imparted moral values and Christian faith. So such kind of works were being taken for the syllabus so that they can also impart moral educations. They can impart, you know, critical thinking from Bacon's work. Then we can also learn philosophical, aspects from John Locke and Adam Smith for the political and social aspects. So these texts were being taken. These text from this particular or famous persons were being taken into the syllabus. So the ultimate conquest was the obtaining of the voluntary consent of the Indians to the changes made. Changes made. Yeah, changes were made. Okay, by educating Indians in the highest values, English literature contained. The British administrators were able to remove the impression that the English were subjugators and alien rulers. The British were able to take the attention of Indians away from their commercial operations, military expansions, and administration of territories. So when they were imparting their own language, their science, their literature, we were taking interest into their literature, their science. We were reading that, we were understanding, and that is when the Britishers were felt very happy that we are not superior because we are marketing over here, we are trading over here, and we are being treated or we are being understood by the British Indians as subjugators, but we are also rulers, and we are ruling through our literature, we are ruling through our language and culture. So this is the cracks of this particular chapter, and there are some other chapters also there, especially the selected poems. So I will must suggest you to read that, like Imtiaz Darkar. She has talked about some poems, and Hosang Merchant. Hosang Merchant has talked about some, gay Indian writing. Okay, and Ione, as I said, that okay, it's a short story talking about the treatment of women as an organ, as a producer of childs, as a, you can say, as a toy for a kid, or who are being treated by the male dominated society as an object, and they treat a life as an animal. So these are some of the aspects has been brought up by Volga in a text that is Ione, and the title itself has a connotation, deeper connotation. It's a the title has a Sanskrit root, and if you will translate it, it will become uh, the name of an organ, female organ, through which childs are being reproduced. So here she, because she was under the discussion in the upper class or mainstream writing, because of such kind of explanation, because this particular work is talking about the problem that was rooted in our society, and where women were being subjugated, marginalized. They are already marginalized and subjugated based on other aspects. But when it comes to the physical desires, they were being treated as animals. They were being treated as an object, right? As an organ only. So these are some of the aspects that has been brought up into this particular story. And then we have almost done. So what we are going to do, what you are supposed to do is that at the end of the book, you will find some model question papers will be there. So I must suggest you to follow all the questions. This will be the pattern probably for your question paper. If you will go through this, you will get an idea that okay, how you are going to get the questions. Okay, you won't get some direct question from because selected poems has been given, not a single text has been given, in the text format in your book. So it is not a burden for you. What you have to do is that you just have to go through the background of the text or background of some of the literary text that has been discussed in this book, and also about the poet or the authors and their critical thinking, that okay, what they has represented into their books, what they have talked about into their books, the major themes. As we talked about Gitanjali, it talks about spirituality, it talk about religion, it talk about emancipation and freedom, right? It talks about nationalism as well, and it talks about the spirituality and the essence of nature as well. Okay? So when we're talking about a particular writer, when we're talking about a particular poet, how and why she or he has represented or taken these particular themes to be discussed into his or her work, you just have to go through that one. So it's very easy. Take at least 1 hour for a day and go through them once. It will be very easy to remember. I must say that okay, you all of you are very good. And if you need any kind of help, you can ask me. Probably my number is there with you, and some of you have my number. So if you need any kind of help or regarding any suggestions, please do let me know. And stay blessed. If you have any question or query, you can ask me. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Sir, about Dalit literature,
Uh huh.
in assignment it is given, sir,
Yes.
regarding aesthetics of Dalit literature.
Yes. Yes.
Um, I have taken that, sir, for to write the assignment.
You have written that one.
Yes, sir. Critically examine the concept of Dalit aesthetics.
Yeah, that's good.
Because I have taken now points also, I try to understand that it is quite different from the other literature. There's a
Uh
thought,
huh.
as you said.
Uh huh.
Most of the point as Dalit literature is mainly about equality, liberty.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Can you repeat again because your voice is coming as if it's coming from far.
Sir, I have taken Dalit aesthetic. Critically examine the concept of Dalit aesthetic. And just now you explained there's a huge
Yeah,
gap
so
between
what are the points that you have mentioned in that question?
that Dalit literature is literature of downtrodden, lower caste
Uh
people,
huh.
and aesthetic means it's not the pleasure and the beauty. It is about the
Okay.
reality. I
Yes.
mentioned that point, and
Yeah,
it
that's
is
fine.
about the liberation, equality, and
Yes, those points are also valid. Yeah, it's fine.
cooperated.
Okay, it's perfectly fine. Any other thing?
So almost I finished the assignment on book 6.
That's good. The points that you have mentioned are the main or key aspects of Dalit aesthetics and Dalit literature. So there is no need to change anything. Like here in this particular chapter, Saran Kumar Limbel, what he has talked about is that that there is a sharp gap between the literature and the non-Dalit literature, where one is talking about reality, other one is talking about imagination. Even though we are reflecting on reality, we are being subjugated, we are being marginalized in the mainstream literature, right? So he is trying to give aesthetic a definition of that one. So if you want to add something, you can add based on this one. Otherwise, that is also fine. That the thing that you have mentioned.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Sir, if
Okay.
you have
Thank
any
you.
doubts,
Yes.
sir,
Yes.
I will contact you, sir. Please.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you to
Thank
all
you,
of
sir.
you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Stay blessed. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.